Tommy Tringale. I've been involved in living history reenacting since 1994.
Welcome back to the channel. Today we're launching a new series titled Reenacting Perspectives, where we sit down with key figures from across the hobby outside of the 10th. For our first episode, we're joined by one of the most recognizable faces in the Northeast, Tommy Tringale. Tommy has been instrumental in advancing authenticity within the reenacting community, as well as leading the planning of some of the most immersive events in our region. A member of Klaus's Rangers and the 3rd Massachusetts Regiment, he has helped bring a new standard of authenticity to New England through events such as Chase Farm and more recently the Army on Campaign at the Bidwell House. We're excited to kick off the series with Tommy's story, so let's dive right into the conversation.
I started with my home local unit, the Billerica Colonial Minutemen, and since then, as my interest in the hobby grew, I expanded to other interests. So now I am part of the 3rd Massachusetts Regiment, which is an American Continental Regiment that fought primarily during the Saratoga Campaign and the New York Campaign. And then my other primary impression is Daniel Klaus's Rangers, which is a British loyalist unit who fought mostly alongside indigenous tribes who were allied with the British, and they operated mostly between the Montreal and New York City area.
So how did you first get involved in reenacting, and what initially drew you to the hobby?
So I've been interested in in history since about 4th grade, after seeing movies like Last of Mohicans and Gettysburg, and then April Morning, which was about the battles of Lexington and Concord. And then in my hometown in Billerica, there was a yearly homecoming weekend, and the Billerica Colonial Minutemen would set up an encampment, and I just remember sitting and watching for hours. The other reason that I got into history was the elementary school I went to was Thomas Ditson Elementary, and Thomas Ditson is famous in the town and hopefully in American history as he was tarred and feathered in Boston in March of 1775, and it was a horrific experience, but that's a claim to fame for our town, and my school was named after him, and every year the town would recreate the tar and feathering of Thomas Ditson, and I was just enthralled by it. And when I was old enough, I was about 9, and I forced my mom to join reenacting with me, and my very first event was a 4th of July parade event in Burlington, Mass. And then after that I just got into more encampments and a lot of local events, but then as I got older and I was able to drive and take myself, or I found people who were able to take me, I was able to go to events farther away. And the more events I went to, the more in love I fell with the hobby and reenacting.
Awesome. Can you share a moment or an event early on in your reenacting career that solidified your passion for it?
Yeah, so I think my first big event was the 225th anniversary of the Battle of Trenton, and I got to take part in the crossing of the Delaware River, and I was only 16 years old. And then I joined all the other participants and walked the 9 miles from the Delaware River to Trenton, and it was really, really hard, but it was the first real experience that I had, was walking the streets of Trenton and being there with, I had never seen thousands of reenactors before, and this was the first time I saw that many people involved in this community that I've been part of as well.
Okay. Over the years, how has your perspective on the hobby changed from when you started to now?
I think when I started, it was, reenacting for me was seen as just something to do on weekends. To dress up in funny clothes and go camp and be with other people who liked to dress up in funny clothes and camp and play with firearms or play with cannons, and cook outside and get away from modern technology. I think it was maybe in my mid-teens or early 20s that I grew in understanding that there is a responsibility with being a living historian, that you're telling a story, that you're trying to bring to life what people experienced 200 and whatever years ago. As living historians, it's our duty, or our job as educators, to bring to life every aspect of the American Revolution, as a British soldier, as an American soldier, as a Native American, as a German soldier, as a civilian. Whatever story we're doing, we need to make it as accurate and as authentic as possible. And I didn't appreciate that until I got older. And that's when I invested more in making sure that my clothing was correct, that my accoutrements were correct, that I'm doing little things like shaving before an event, that what I bring to events, like my sleeping arrangements. I used to bring tons of stuff, and it would take forever to unload my car, and then it would take forever to set up my tent, and then it would take forever to break everything down, and then it would take forever to unpack it. And then I was just like, this is unnecessary, and this is not how soldiers would have lived back then. So things like less is more, understanding that quality over quantity, living out of your pack, it as I got older, I got a better appreciation for that.
That really ties into our next kind of topic in terms of authenticity and its growth. Mm-hmm. How have you seen authenticity standards evolve since you first started reenacting and looking at different aspects from material culture to first-person interpretation?
Sure. Sure. So the way I see it is, if you want to go to the best events, you will adapt to what's required of that event. So the first event that I really attended that had some sort of material culture guideline was Under the Red Coat in Colonial Williamsburg, where clothing had to be correct for 1781. So British units who wanted to go had to update their impression to what was correct for 1781 in Virginia. During the 225th anniversary cycle, there were some events that provincial units, American units, did have to make some changes to what they were wearing, but nothing was really enforced. I would say enforced guidelines or something that maybe has only been around for 10 years. Other than Under the Red Coat. And I think it's truly for the better. When we do these events, we have this mantra of, when you look at us, think of them. And we want to be able to put out the best product, not just for visitors and spectators, but for fellow reenactors. And I want to make sure that I look great, so that the guy who's next to me has a more authentic, real experience. That's important for me, because our community is not that big. And we want people to keep coming to these events. And I want to go to events where I know other people are giving it their all when it comes to material culture, when it comes to camping, when it comes to what they're eating, when it comes to being able to stay off their phones for a weekend and just cutting themselves off from what's going on around them in the modern sense, that when we're at an event, we're in it. We're in it for the entirety of it, and things like that. That encourages me to want to go to as much as possible, and I want other people to go to things as much as possible. And I would hope that they have the same mindset as I do.
Yeah, so in the same time frame that authenticity has really, grown in the hobby, you've also taken a very large leadership role, not only in the hobby itself, also within your unit. So
sure.
Within the units that you run, how did you approach the topic of enforcing authenticity, and were there any hurdles that you had to face, and how did you overcome those?
Sure. So the first group that I was part of that really had a major change in material culture guidelines was I was doing a Royal Navy impression, and there hadn't been a lot of research on what sailors were wearing. We had a pretty generic idea that they were wearing a blue coat and petticoat breeches, either on land and on the ship, and striped socks with a red hat, and everybody looked the same. But the fact that just wasn't the case. We were fortunate enough to get some friends who are experts on maritime clothing and naval clothing to join in the mid-2000s, who had done a lot of research on what sailors were wearing, and we switched to more appropriate fitted coats. We were wearing trousers. We originally were wearing tar bucket hats, and we learned that tar bucket hats weren't correct, so we had changed to felt hats. So there was a little bit of pullback because people are worried about spending too much money on updating clothing, but it was worth it. It was worth the investment, because then we became this great looking Royal Navy impression. When I joined 3rd Massachusetts, they were already going through a transition from maybe less accurate a look and material culture to more accurate, more authentic, and I kind of joined at the right time to help give that push to, you know, what we're eating needs to be more correct. We're bringing too many things for our camp setup. We have too many anachronisms lying around our camp, and fortunately people were open to the idea of updating their kit to what the 3rd Massachusetts, how they looked, especially during the Saratoga campaign, because that was our prime time period that we were creating. And we take that very, very seriously, from the accoutrements that we wear, to the coats that we wear, to how we sleep, to what we eat, to how we drill. Like, we take it very seriously, and now I would say that 3rd Massachusetts is one of the premier American units in the hobby. Klaus's Rangers, they were already a well-respected, authentic unit before I joined. It was one of the things that drew me to joining the group. But since I've joined, I think my added effect to the unit is bringing in new people who also want to try more authentic reenacting, more authentic living history, and people who are not used to living off a pack, bringing everything that you need for the weekend, carrying it on your back, and then living that way for the weekend, and then leaving. Since I've joined, we've taken on another impression doing Butler's Rangers, which was a major loyalist unit that fought in the New York, Pennsylvania, Canada, Kentucky, like they were all over the place. And we really wanted to bring an authentic looking Butler's impression to the hobby. And it's an impression that we're really, really proud of.
Awesome. So zooming out, you have run these units, but you also have run events. So staying within the confines of authenticity, we'll move to like event planning. You play in Battle Road, which has been, you know, pretty much the premier event for authenticity standards. And what was it like taking that idea of authenticity and then applying it not only at a unit level where you're controlling, you know,
Sure.
a few dozen guys, to, you know, an event level where, Battle Road we saw up to 700. So
Yep.
what was it like planning that, and what kind of pushback did you receive, and how did you deal with that?
So planning Battle Road was a blast. It was very enjoyable. It helped that we had such a strong backing from the National Park Service. They really led the way with not just coming up with these guidelines, but enforcing them and sticking true to what the vision was for Battle Road. Running Battle Road and coming up with the guidelines, it was influenced from events that are held at Fort Ticonderoga, the 250th of the Boston Massacre, under the Redcoat, that had these guidelines clearly written out of what you could and couldn't have. It was really hard to argue against what these guidelines were saying. There was some pushback from people who were stubborn about having to update their clothing and update their accoutrements. And they wanted to basically prove a negative, in the sense, well, you can't tell me that they didn't carry this sort of thing. And it's like, well, do you have documentation to prove that they had it? And that was kind of the argument that was going back and forth. You can't prove a negative. So the guidelines were always open for editing, as long as you could prove from firsthand accounts that something was carried. And I think we did a meticulous job of, like, from shirts and coats and hats and gowns and shoes, we covered everything. It was impossible to not have a crystal clear idea of how the provincials, the British, the evacuees, of how everyone should be dressed. But if you invest in it, and if you invest in the look, these things that you're changing, that you're updating, you're carrying and wearing those for more than just Battle Road, or you should be at least. And I think running other events, I'm greatly influenced by how well the things like Battle Road and the Boston Massacre and Under the Redcoat and Fort Ticonderoga are received by the majority. If you can ignore the loud minority who just want things to be the same forever so that they don't have to spend any money. They don't have to put in any time or effort into updating. As long as you're willing to ignore that, you're going to run a really good event. When I put an event together, I always try to go for quality over quantity. If that means that I only have 50 or 70 people who look great, then 200 people where only 70 people look great. I want everyone there looking excellent because it's important for me to put on the best product for not just the spectators, but also the fellow participants and also like the site owner. And these people who are letting us use their site and use their land and invest in having all these people here, I think we have a responsibility to do the best event possible for them as well.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to newer reenactors that are trying to improve their impressions and historical accuracy?
Talk to people before you buy anything. Yeah. This is an expensive hobby. Yep. And before you put money down on something that you're not totally sure is correct, talk to someone who knows. In this day and age where social media is readily available to ask questions and reach out, everybody is ready to help. And you just have to be willing to seek that help.
You have planned some amazing events over your time in the hobby. So first of all, just want to dive into like some of the favorite events that you've planned?
Sure. I guess one of my favorite events is probably the first major event I ever planned, which was in 2006. I was 21 years old, and I planned an encampment in Billerica as part of the town's 350th anniversary celebration. And that was really intimidating and stressful to run just because it was the first one that I had ever put together. And I was the one that reached out to all the different groups. We did it in the only field in Billerica that could hold, I think we had a couple hundred participants. And it was across the street from the Billerica House of Correction, which was interesting. And I learned a lot from that event about the importance of, parking and the importance of camp logistics and how to properly set up a camp, and the importance of how to run a tactical demonstration and how to select people who know how to do things on the field. And I think because I was so young, if somebody who is older than me made a suggestion that they think would have made the event better, we went with it just because I was young and I was trying to be respectful and thinking that they knew better than I did. But I think since then, I've learned how to stick to my guns more, to what I feel is what makes an event great. So other events that I've been really, really proud of, Chase Farm in Lincoln, Rhode Island. We did 2 events there and they went really, really well. The field was amazing. The site owners were really helpful, and we did a lot on a piece of land that nobody had ever really visited before. And I think my now favorite events have been at the Bidwell House in Monterey, Massachusetts. The site owners have been amazing, and even in this location that nobody's ever heard of, nobody's really heard of Monterey, Massachusetts, and in this house that's in the middle of nowhere, twice now we've put on pretty amazing events, and not just like tactical demonstrations, but we've ran great lectures as well, which is something new that I think is really important for events. It's not, you want people to not just show up and sit around and go do the battle and then sit around again. You want to give them programs where they can go learn, and the more reenactors and participants have to do, the more successful the event is. You don't want people just showing up and sitting around for a couple hours and then going and doing the battle and then not doing anything. If you give them fatigue duty to do, if you say we're going to go move cannons from one position to the other, if we're going to go build a redoubt, if you were going to have a camp kitchen that they can cook the way that the soldiers cook their food, if you're going to go learn about health and wellness, if you're going to how a tavern operated and the importance of newspapers and printing and how people communicated back then, if you can provide all those things at an event, it's really successful. And the Bidwell House has allowed me to put my vision out there for everyone, and it's been the easiest and least stressful event that I've ever put together in my time of event planning.
So I guess elaborate, what is your vision for an ideal reenactment? And you can also touch on like what are the most important ingredients to a successful reenactment? Sure.
So I think my vision always includes making sure that like the tactical demonstrations, there's a story behind the tactical demonstrations rather than both sides just standing on a piece of ground and blasting away at each other. That we have somebody who's really great at basically play-by-play commentary and explaining to the public of what they're seeing out on the field. You want a historical backdrop, so if you could avoid being around busy streets and highways and things like that, because you don't want the sounds of the modern world interrupting, nature, because nature plays a big role in providing that historical vibe for us. At night, you want to hear crickets and you want to hear your fire cracking. During the day, you want to hear birds. You want to hear the rustling of trees and stuff, because that all helps sets the tone and the environment for your event. You need really good communication with the site owners. Even something as simple as cutting down brush to build a shelter, you want to make sure that that's allowed ahead of time. And as long as you follow the rules of what the site owners set for you, then you really have free reign over the site. That at my events, that there's at least one opportunity where reenactors and participants get lost in what's going on and they have a real moment, even if it's only for like 10 or 15 seconds, that they're like, oh my god, like I really felt that I was back there. That non-combatants feel valued, that they're not just there as background, and that they're just not just sitting around in camp, that they're involved in some way of the event being successful, either doing a laundry demonstration or doing a nursing demonstration or having a tavern that's being operated to show how people communicated and socialized back then. If I can provide all of those different components of an event, then I think it's successful. And as long as the people who come, they want it. An event is successful when they come back when you do it again.
You spoke on, having that moment as a reenactor. What have been some of those moments for you at some of your events?
I think at my events, one of my, biggest moments was at the Bidwell House the last time we did it. It was raining, the weather was terrible, but because of how muggy it was, the smoke from the musket firing left a really, really dense fog on the battlefield. And there was a moment where the entire line of the Americans fired a great volley, and then they charged through the smoke, and before you could see them, you could hear them. And they were screaming and whooping and hollering, and I just remember being like, this is really how it was back then. And it was incredible, and I know that other people felt that way also.
There you go. Might be able to give him one more. Oh shit! Rangers, give fire! Oh, come on, let us move up. Please. Retire! Rangers, retire! One quick mark. Okay, let's get here. Trees. I see. Yeah. Left face. Go! Rangers, get out of here! Go! Fall back!
You've got observers! You've got observers!
Hey, Gray! Ready! Reset! Set! Fire! Nice! Trail!
I've done Lexington Green once on the British side, and I definitely got lost in the moment charging across the green, and I'm sure other British reenactors have felt that way also. Just a controlled chaos on the green, but also I think because you value safety on Lexington Green, worrying about being safe kind of causes you to be in the moment, and you don't want to hurt anybody, but you are trying to hurt people historically, I guess you could say.
And finally, what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned from organizing events?
Stand your ground when people are unhappy with your rules and guidelines. If you feel that having guidelines is what will help make your event more successful, then go with that. Don't buckle under the pressure of people. And set rules ahead of time. Set guidelines ahead of time. Be crystal clear with your communication well ahead of the event. Have any support you have, make sure it's people who share that same vision as you do. And then do things like, the field commanders on both the British and the American side, make sure that they're good at it. Don't just, throw a name out. Make sure it's people who know what they're doing. And then always be available to answer questions. And don't leave people wondering. In this day and age where email and social media and web pages and whatever, it's almost impossible to not be able to get all the information out about your event well ahead of time. Also having a great support team of people who are willing to help with the logistics of an event, of helping setting camps up and helping with registration, things that you don't, the mundane stuff that you really don't want to think about as the lead organizer, because it's important for me to be able to roam around the site during setup and breaking down to make sure everybody goes where they're supposed to go. And as long as you have all of those components, the event's going to be great. And then hopefully people are willing to pay $5-10 for parking and think that it's a worthwhile experience when you're the public. As an event organizer who's going to be involved in things happening throughout the 250th, I want to say to people in the living history community that investing in authenticity is important to our community, to our responsibility as telling the story of these people who we're representing, and that I would say events like Battle Road will have a great influence on how other 250th events from now through 2031 will be run. And we shouldn't be letting like a facial hair rule and being stubborn about shaving and not wanting to, update our material culture and accoutrements. Don't let that stop you from attending really great events, because in the end, you're the one missing out, and that would be a real shame. Thank you so much for coming to my tavern in Billerica, and I look forward to seeing all the viewers at the future 250th anniversary.